This episode is brought to you by Distilled Experiences. Welcome back to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I am your host, Perry. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 103. Super fun and interesting episode that we've got for you this week with the master distiller of Four Roses, Mr. Brent Elliot himself. So happy to finally have gotten Brent on the show. We've kind of been working on it in the background for a little while, and things finally came together. And I figured to celebrate, I would sip on a Four Roses single barrel private selection that Brent selected himself for the Four Roses gift shop. And man, let me tell you, it is a very good OBSV tenure pick from Mr. Brent Elliot himself. More on him in just a minute. Couple of things to take care of right up top. And first off, we are in the middle of our Movember campaign. That's right, we are raising money for the charity organization Movember, which raises awareness for men's health and men's mental health. The health side of things, of course, being testicular and prostate health and cancer awareness, and then the mental health side of it, of course, is making sure to talk about things like depression and anxiety and lowering the suicide rate in men. It's not a pretty topic to talk about, but it is something that is very near and dear to my heart and something that I really wanted to find a way to increase awareness of and increase resources for when the time was right. And, you know, this is something that I've been wanting to do through the podcast for a long time now. And finally, it feels like it's the right time. So if you want to find out how to donate to our campaign, you can find the link in the description below, as well as on all social media channels. That is at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So please, as of talking about this, we are just over halfway to our goal of $500 towards Movember. So please, if you are able to do so, if you have it within your heart, to donate to that charity, it would be absolutely fantastic, and we would really appreciate it. There are going to be some rewards, actually, for donating to that. We're working on a few of those kind of behind the scenes right now, but one of the big ones right now is that you can ask a question in the topic line, or in the message line, rather, when you donate. And that question will be read out on a special Q&A bonus episode just for the folks who donate to the charity campaign. And that will be coming out probably mid-December. That will include, of course, myself, Curtis, and Swan. So that's something that will only be available for them. If you have already donated to that and you want to ask a question, you're listening to this right now, of course, please feel free to send us a message or to send us an email. This is mybourbonshop@gmail.com. We will happily include that in the list of cues that you will receive an A2 come mid-December. So, one last bit of news, just so you don't have to listen to me interrupt this fabulous interview with Mr. Brent Elliot himself, and that is about our sponsor, Distilled Experiences. It is a tour company out of Lexington, Kentucky that I work with. They take folks around from different distilleries while at the same time getting to show them the beautiful countryside of central Kentucky. It is an absolutely wonderful experience. You are not going to find any more knowledge, any more passion anywhere else outside of Distilled Experiences. They currently offer 2 different tours during the week, a Friday public tour and a Saturday public tour. But next year, the tour schedule is going to be changed up quite a bit to include a Thursday night event, a Friday day horse tour, and then a Saturday day bourbon tour, and then a best of both worlds experience on Sundays. And then still throughout the week, if you are interested in booking private tours, you can do that as well at distilledexperiences.com. And speaking of distilledexperiences.com, if you would like to book one of those experiences, one of the private. And speaking of distilledexperiences.com, if you would like to book one of the public tours for 10% off, you can use the coupon code MyBourbonPodcast. That's right, for 10% off, you can use the code MyBourbonPodcast at checkout at distilledexperiences.com. And you might even have the wonderful opportunity to have yours truly as your tour guide for that day. So, once again, My Bourbon Podcast, distilledexperiences.com. So, I think that about does it for all the business that we have up top. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into this interview with Master Distiller at Four Roses, Brent Elliot. Enjoy! Every now and then we get a really nice little treat on the show, and this is no different. Brent Elliot, the Master Distiller at Four Roses. Brent, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Perry.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is really special. We were going to try to get you on around Bourbon and Beyond time, and it didn't work out, and now here we are sitting in the lab at the Four Roses Distillery.
I thought it was a good place for a podcast.
I think it pretty well suits it.
Sensory aids here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're just surrounded by essentially Four Roses history down here, too. It's pretty incredible to see all these different bottles that have come, from before you, and, you've also brought into the fold and everything, too.
Yeah, the library here goes pretty far back. And speaking of history, where we're sitting right now, this used to be the gift shop.
Really?
Yeah, I know you said you'd been here before, but
if
you hadn't been here pre-2012, then you're not aware of the fact that the main building up on the hill, that's new. The gift shop that we met in and visitor center, that used to be all the offices. That was everyone's office was in that
Wow.
building. And this right here, if you can imagine this small space, which is now, for you that can't see this is our sensory lab.
Yeah.
Which it's not small, but it certainly can accommodate more than 5 or 10 visitors at any one time. And if you go up to today it's a rainy day, it's starting to get cold out, so it's not too crowded up top. But picture even a Tuesday or Wednesday in the middle of summer, or a Saturday or Sunday anytime during the year.
Oh, yeah.
It's packed up there.
Absolutely.
So we outgrew this space. Well, we probably outgrew it in like 2010, 2011, but we moved out of this space, moved the gift shop out of this space in 2012.
Right. And you guys just got finished with a new renovation, too.
Yeah.
On the distillery grounds. Talk a little bit about that. What all did you have go into that?
That was a big project. That all began in roughly 2013.
Okay.
That was about the period that we realized that our capacity here was not going to be able to keep up with the demand. And we were okay then, but we knew that looking out 5, 10, especially out even beyond that,
right,
with the capacity of the distillery, we wouldn't be able to keep pace. So we started the expansion project shortly after that, and it was about at least a 3-year project, and it was here and at the warehousing and bottling facility.
Right.
So it was just here. It was about a $55 million expansion project, which essentially meant, or what went into that was doubling our capacity. Because
that's incredible.
You may or may not know, but our parent company, we're owned by Kirin,
right,
a Japanese beer company. Mm-hmm. And so when we realized that we needed to expand, we realized we had to do something. We all got together and started talking about the best way to do it. And we realized that the only way that we were going to do it was if we did it on site, did it in the same facility. We don't want to move even back to the back of the property and pull water from the Salt River, which would be the next best situation because it's still local and it's still from the same water source. But we didn't want to really rock the boat at all. We wanted to minimize any potential risk for changing the flavor profile of Four Roses.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't want to just do a partial expansion because you've seen the process of distilling before. If I took you out and showed you how we do things, it's timed so precisely that to throw that off, you're just welcoming disaster. You don't want to do that.
Right. So,
it doesn't sound very creative, but we had one way to do it, and that was to do exactly what we're doing now, the same scale, in the same building, on the same site, which was more expensive, and we didn't necessarily need that much expansion or that much capacity immediately. But that was the proposal that we took to Kirin. So we've got to do it this way. It's going to be $55 million. It's going to take 3 years. And they said yes, which was fantastic.
Great.
We were kind of shocked. Yeah. Because it's a lot of money. Yeah. And it's really just on speculation because with bourbon, it's not make it today, sell it tomorrow. You've got to wait. In our case, the youngest product is 5 years.
Right.
And even that's 5 and 6 year old products. So we're looking at 5 to 10 years and speculating what the market's going to be.
Right.
And putting all this money on what essentially comes down to an educated guess. It doesn't matter who you consult, what kind of data you crunch. Nobody knows. It is really just, there are degrees of how educated that guess is, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a guess. And that's what we had to base all that on. But Kieran understands that the whole argument that we put forth, as far as the quality and the scale, they understood all that. So they said yes.
Well, and it really seems like, in this case, that educated guess kind of paid off. I mean, you look at what's in your gift shop right now, and there's a noticeable gap.
Yeah, exactly.
The single barrel's not there, the OBSB.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And that whole thing started about the same time when we realized that we couldn't keep up. That was the second half of it. We needed to expand, but we also were in a situation where we had to start allocating. Mm-hmm. And we're just not getting through that. We're through it on small batch. We're through it on the Four Roses bourbon, the single barrel. And it always happens towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because you get in a hole. Everybody wants it all year long. And then if you start running out toward the end of the year, then everybody orders on the front end. And it's hard to dig back out of that. So we're getting out of that hole right now. And you can see we don't get any special treatment. If Kentucky isn't getting their shipments, we're not either.
Yeah.
But it's actually, we have, currently, we have enough to get through the rest of the year in Kentucky and in most states. But I would not be surprised if there are some other places that end up with empty shelves. That right there is probably just the effect of a busy weekend.
Sure.
And our shipment hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah.
And it's Wednesday, right?
Yes.
It should be here.
Wednesday.
Yeah. So it's not that dire. It's not, the situation isn't that dire. That does happen occasionally. If we have a weekend that is super busy and we weren't anticipating it, then sometimes we'll run dry for a day or two. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised to hear that. But,
and there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, it just kind of goes without saying because it is, I mean, as you said, bourbon's not an overnight thing. I mean, you've got to wait for it. You can't just pull something out of nowhere and go, all right, this is, here's what you get in the meantime.
Here it is. Yeah, it's not like,
What's nice about it now, though, is that you have another product that people can kind of go to if they really do want to purchase something special that's in the gift shop, and that's the Small Batch Select.
Yes.
Which came out this year.
They can go to it here or in 4 other markets. Unfortunately, right now, it's not nationwide.
Right.
Which will sound kind of, when I explain the whole idea behind this product, it sounds contradictory to what I'm trying to explain because it's not in every market. The whole idea behind this product is so that everybody, that's what I'm stressing, is so that everyone at any time can get a Four Roses higher proof non-chill filtered product.
Right.
Because the private selections, they're great. People love them. You can't get them everywhere. This product, again, not now. This isn't true. You can't get it anywhere. But in the next couple of years, this will be available everywhere. Right now, it's only in 5 states. So, obviously, Kentucky's one of them.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah.
Have you tried it yet?
I have tried it yet. I'd love to try it with you, though.
Well, absolutely.
Since it's sitting out here on the table.
Yeah. And as I'm pouring, I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
Yes, please.
So this is, again, you'll notice it's in the small batch bottle.
Yes.
It is the same small batch concept. And if it's in this bottle, it's a small batch, whether it's limited edition, the standard small batch, or this. And the small batch concept, it really leans on our uniqueness. We're trying to show how we have the 10 different recipes and how we can bring them together in different combinations to create something very different from the last release, if it's a limited edition, or small batch versus small batch select. It's very different because it's different recipes. Mm-hmm. So the concept is the same. What's different is the proof. This is 104 proof versus the 90 in the small batch. The fact that it's non-chill filtered, and the 6 different recipes that go into this.
Right.
We don't have any other products that use that combination that have this same flavor profile.
So it is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but is there more innovation to be done with the small batch a product from Four Roses? Because, I mean, yes, you do see, the small batch limited edition that comes out every year, unless it's the single barrel. But, are you stopping at the fourth rose? For lack of a different phrase.
It is. We do refer to it as the fourth rose. Right now, it's too early to tell. I mean, it is a platform for expansion, absolutely, and that's kind of how it's set up. But honestly, there hasn't been any discussion about expanding on that next year, 5 years, 10 years. If you look at small batch, that was the last edition of a product you could get every day, besides private selections and limited editions. That was the last addition to our lineup, and that was 2006. So it's 12, 13 years between releases. So you can see we're not just trying to throw things out just to see what sticks. It's not just every 6 months.
Absolutely.
Just shoot with just anything. With this, we put a lot of thought into it. We wanted to offer something that was different and something that the modern consumer was looking for. And that's where the non-chill filter, the higher proof comes in.
Definitely.
That really speaks to a lot of people.
When did the development process for this begin?
It started out first, it was about, I guess, 2 years, year and a half in development.
Sure.
First, it was just the concept. First, it was just the idea of putting something out there. And we kind of had an idea of the concept. Then it was pitching the concept, working with how to position it. Did we want to do something ultra premium, something more like small batch, something single barrel, something more like the Four Roses Bourbon, but maybe a different proof. There are a million different directions we could have gone.
Of course.
But I think it was pretty clear early on that the gap in our portfolio is where this is now positioned. Something a little, again, higher proof, something for the modern consumer.
Yeah.
People love our private barrel program is just phenomenal. The way it's taken off. And it's great, but the problem is we're doing 50 barrels of that a month. Wow. So and it sounds like maybe that's a lot, but if you look at, forget about looking at the country or how it's, look at all of the retailers that are in line that want one that can't get one.
Right.
And eventually they will, but the problem is there just isn't enough of that to go around. And it's not available to every person that likes the non-chill filtered higher strength. It's not available to every one of those consumers every day at every store that they might want to visit. So that was the idea behind this.
I think it's been, it seems like from, consumers' perspective, like it's been successful.
People,
since
of course they're going to tell me that, but everyone I talk to, that's their favorite bourbon they've ever had.
Yeah. But it is the one that I've kind of been pointing people to, if they want an experience from Four Roses that, is really, truly unique. And I think that, it's...
It is. I think it really accomplishes everything we thought it would and more. Because really, you don't ever say, okay, our goal here is to do this, 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 and make it delicious. But the fact is, that's the bottom line. You want it to
Absolutely.
be... It's got to be different. It's got to be something new. But if the consumer likes that, and it'll get them there in the first place, but if it just doesn't have a great flavor, that's what really matters to actually get a consumer to buy into it or to buy it again or to to tell their friends about it. That's what's so. But in here we're always talking about consistency and the recipes and percentages. But the fact is, bottom line is it's got to be good. It has to be delicious.
Yeah.
And I really think, now of course I do because this is the first one that I did on my own, or the first one that I did as master distiller. Sure. So obviously it was catered to my taste exactly because there wasn't a standard that I'm trying to follow here. It was kind of like the limited editions. I mean, it's just that's where the creativity comes in. It's just do whatever. So ultimately, there's no standard. So I guess the standard is what I like.
Yeah.
So I feel like this one was, I guess, catered to my taste buds inadvertently, and I'm just glad that a lot of people agree with what I like.
I like that you touched on the ability to be creative with this too, because I feel like that's something that not a lot of people consider when they think about master distillers.
Uh-huh.
Just the kind of general consumer. Their first thought is not, well, I wonder how much thought they put into this, or you wonder how many different things they tried before they settled on what's in hand or what's in the shelf or what's in your glass.
Uh-huh.
And so to hear you specifically say that you enjoy the creativity and the craft behind it, that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think if you look at any master distiller, anybody that's in that position is there because they love the craft, they're passionate about whiskey or their brand, whatever it may be, and just because that's the original sentiment, people want to, or master distillers want to be creative and want to try new things and make their product the best they possibly can. So whether it's, in our case, when I say creativity here, I'm talking about mingling after the barrels are aged. Mm-hmm. But you see there's a lot of opportunity for creativity in the grains used, how you're producing in the distillery, fermentation, distillation. There's so much room for creativity everywhere. Right. For us, we're fortunate that there's a lot of room for creativity with immediate results at the end with 10 recipes. Because you might tweak a mash bill or try a new yeast strain or whatever you might want to try differently in the distillery, but you're still sitting waiting 5, 6, 7 years before you know what happened there.
Sure.
For us, we got 10 recipes. I can pull different samples and within an afternoon have 5 new flavor profiles developed.
Right.
They might not all work out. They might... Well, it's hard to screw it up when we put it that way. They would all work out. It's degrees of how good they are.
Sure.
They might not all be your favorite. There are going to be a few that you like better, and so I guess I'm just telling you the creativity part of my job isn't that difficult. I could probably I could throw a dart at a couple different recipes, and it's going to turn out okay. But the hardest part is making it as good as it could possibly be with the batches that we have to work with every year. And then the second hardest part is knowing when to stop, because you can always take these recipes, bring them together, and you can always make it better.
Would there ever be a time when you would maybe release 2, 3, 5 different small batch limited editions in a year?
I doubt it, but I would not say no. I always joke that we're a pretty small staff here, and we're well staffed. There are enough of us, but we don't have a development department. We don't have a research department. We don't have a whole lot of resources, but we have a lot of good ideas, and we hear a lot of good ideas. And like when I hear you say that, yeah, I would love to do that.
Of course.
I think it would be great to have every season there's a new release. It's just not feasible right now. I'd like to have a rye whiskey. I'd like to have the list of good ideas is so long that we have to prioritize, and we have to decide what we can do at what time each year. And fortunately, we have the limited edition. That's a staple. We're going to do that every year. But there are always good ideas out there.
Yeah.
And we're always exploring those and doing what we can.
Right.
But as we grow, we'll have more opportunity, more resources to try to do more and more of these creative and unique things.
Sure.
At least unique to us.
Yeah. Let's talk too about, we'll circle back around to the small batch LE from this year in a little bit. I want to talk about the first couple of years of you being the master distiller here.
Okay.
And the events that led up to that. And I specifically want to ask you about Jim Rutledge.
Okay.
Because the man, has 1,000,001 stories as it is and has lived as many lives as you possibly can in the bourbon industry and knows probably more than we will ever forget, or I will ever forget, about bourbon.
Oh, yeah.
What was your relationship with him like as you were coming up as the master distiller here at Four Roses?
It was always, he was always so open and helpful with his information, with feedback, always accessible. I remember even when I first came to interview, I was like, I'm going to meet the master distiller. And, he walked in the room. It was, I don't know how many people interviewed for my position. This was back in 2005. And, he just walked in, very polite, listened intently, and asked a couple questions, and went about the rest of his day. And it was all from that moment on, I was kind of disarmed. I was like, oh, he's just a regular, accessible guy.
Exactly.
And then, of course, working with him over the years, we built a relationship. We were working together a lot, in particular on like test ones, barrel selections, that sort of thing. And then, but everything that he worked on, he was very helpful and very open and nurturing about, whether it was just advice about, well, for example, advice about production, or, good example, advice to me personally when he retired and I took over. We talked at length. He just gave me advice about, a lot of it was about work-life balance.
Sure.
And which, at the time, and I understood that it was important, and I knew where he was coming from, but now that I'm a few years into it, all that advice, I realized just how valuable it was.
Yeah.
And so he was a pleasure to work with. What he had done here was remarkable. And I'm sure you've heard the stories, but this plant was teetering on being shut down just because the quality of what was coming out was not good. He came in, worked with the people here, John, Al, people in the plant, and before long, he turned the quality around, and then the next thing you know, Kieran's coming in to buy us, and first thing he asks them is if they would please bring Four Roses as a bourbon back to the U.S. And then the next thing, so I'm almost here, so I'm almost on the scene here. So, but between then and when I show up, he's out with bourbon in his trunk. He's driving to restaurants and accounts just locally, walking through the door. Just cold calls essentially. He's a master distiller. He's not a salesman, but he loved the brand that much that he was doing that.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of went from there. He was always there doing exactly what the brand needed to. He loved Four Roses, so he put all those years behind the brand to help get it to where it is today.
That entrepreneurial spirit is something that I feel like everybody in the bourbon industry during the dark ages had independently of one another. And they all said, without talking to each other, let's save bourbon. And it worked clearly, and but that's just kind of been how I've seen that, is that they all had such a passion for it that, kind of in a hive mind state, without the communication, said we need to do something about that. So do you still talk to Jim fairly regularly? Get a little bit of advice from him now still, or?
I don't hit him up for advice, but we stay in touch.
Sure.
I was just, it's been a while since I talked to him, but we were emailing back and forth about 6 weeks ago. Trying to get together at some event, and then he had something else. So, but
he's a busy man.
He's a busy man. Yeah. I'm busy. He's busy. He's got the Cream of Kentucky. He was telling me a lot about that. That's going well. I was telling him that I was honest. Like, Jim, I'm embarrassed to say, but I haven't even tried it yet. I tried to buy some, and it's off the shelf before I can get to it. He's like, yeah, no. He's aware of that, obviously. That.
Oh yeah, as he should be. Yeah. Was there anything kind of that you felt like you had to maybe live up to or maintain when you took over from Jim?
I get asked that a lot, or I used to a lot. The fact is, the pressure wasn't. I guess the perception is that, like, if I came in and didn't know what I was doing, the distillery would collapse, or distillate wouldn't go out the door the next day. The fact is, it's a team effort here. There's so many people that have been doing this for some people, guys, decades.
Sure.
That if it weren't the case, then master distillers wouldn't be able to travel. But I can tell you, I can pack my bags and go on the road for 2 weeks, and no one's going to gasp and wonder what's going to happen to this place, or what's the next blend, how our single barrel is going to be approved, or all of that stuff. So no, but the pressure was on because because everyone knew Jim. He was proven, and he had such a rapport, or still has such a rapport with bourbon enthusiasts, with the public, and I think I would say that's probably what I learned from him more than as much important stuff as I learned from him. That was probably the most important thing I learned from him, was just how he valued the consumer.
Yeah.
He would take hours if he could, and I've seen him probably literally take hours talking to one or two people that might have just asked him a question.
Right.
And weren't expecting that level of attention.
Sure.
Or that level of detail. And if they're willing to, if they ask and they want to hear it all, then he would tell them.
Yeah.
And just seeing that, and of course that's just another offshoot of that passion and that
absolutely
that love of the industry and the brand. But and I think that I was kind of nervous about that because that is again part of balancing everything.
Of course.
But at the same time, I think that's probably part of how I ended up in this position too, because the passion. Obviously, when I started, I pitched in everywhere and part of that was marketing and hosting guests when they came in, apart from all the work, as I say. But, I guess he recognized that in me too, but that's something that I always admired in him. And I think that was one of the most important things I learned from him, was just how important it is to value the consumer.
Yeah.
To value the people that want to know. Because these things we take for granted, it's like, that's a silly question. But no, if someone doesn't know, it's not a silly question. There are no people are curious about it. And they want to know, and it's something that, of
course,
it's easy for us. We have that information. It's like, it's nothing for me or someone with that information just to give it for free, and it's invaluable to someone asking the question.
Absolutely.
So you have to understand it's that easy just to take some time and talk to people. So
let's talk now about one of these consumer products, as we've already kind of touched on it a little bit. This year's small batch LE. Wildly different from some of the past years in that it had a 21-year-old Four Roses product in it.
Everyone is talking about that, but Al's had a 23-year-old in it. Al's 50th.
Yeah.
But it didn't come through as much. I think that's why people taste this and they see that oak and it's like, oh, well, of course, there's a 21-year-old in there. So it's like, oh, that explains it.
Right.
Al's had some of that, but it didn't have quite the oaky palate that this one has.
Sure, yeah. So what was it, and you're pouring some of it for for us as well, but where did this kind of come into the equation, the 21-year-old aspect of it, and at what point in development did that get pulled into it?
The development process is the only part that's ever the same year after year is the sampling part of it.
Sure.
It's pulling all the barrels, and then from there it can go in so many different directions. I try to explain it in general terms, and then even sometimes trying to remember how we got to where we got, or what the inspiration was that I had when I chose a certain direction. This one, the best I can recall is I recognized one batch that I wanted to be a part of it. It's a 15-year-old, I think the time was a 15-year-old OESV, and then this 21-year-old, which I have both these here for you to taste, by the way.
Oh, my gosh.
It was another really good batch, and started playing with the different test blends. And at that point, there were probably, started out with 20 some odd batches. I narrowed it down to between 8 and 10. But those two, I was pretty sure from the beginning that those two were going to be at least, if not the core of this product, they'd play some kind of a role in it. The other thing I knew was that I wanted to do something different, so that meant I wasn't going to put an F in the mix, because the 2018 had an F, which I love. That's still one of my favorites of all time, the 18. And Al's 50th, which came out just the year before, had F. And F really gives a unique and defining character to any bourbon. That's the defining characteristic to me in the small batch select too. Mm-hmm. So we've done select, owls. So I thought it was time to, because we do the 10 recipes, it's always showing our versatility. As much as I love the F, it's like it's the only thing I know I'm not going to put in there this year. So it started out with those 2 batches, and the one thing that I really like about the 15-year-old OESV is it's got nice oak, but it's not as oaky as it should be for how its age and how rich some of the other barrel notes come through. You don't get that astringent, dry oak that can sometimes go flat or sour or kind of mute some of the more delicate flavors.
Right.
It was still very lively for 15. The older bourbon, what I liked about it was it is a little bit flatter, and it's 21 years old. But it could be a lot worse, I'll tell you. But it did still have some of those characteristics that I wanted to blend out, but it also had some very good characteristics that I wanted to blend up.
Right.
So that's a challenge, is to try to smooth out the rough edges and accentuate the positive. And so that was kind of the core of it, those 2 batches. And then I just kind of built around those.
Sure.
And it was with an OESK that is also 15 years. And I don't have that in front of us, but if you'd like to try it, I can pull it out of the cabinet. And then an 11-year-old that is OBSV, I believe.
I think that sounds right.
Okay, OBSV or OESV, I know is the 11-year-old. And I used to be able to remember all of these. But I think with every new recipe that pops in, another one pops out. I only have so much space for all these recipes to swim around in my head. But
so is it kind of hard for you to get everything straight or keep everything straight from time to time? Or?
I'll tell you, for the first probably 5 limited editions, I could tell you the year, the age, the recipe of every batch that went into it. And at some point, it's like something broke and it all just kind of spilled out. I can kind of give you I can give you tasting notes, and I can give you some generalizations, like I know that the Q was in that year and that was the defining flavor, or that's one that had a 19-year-old or whatever. But to tell you, to even go back to I know I can't. I used to be able to tell you percentages and everything. No, but I can tell you as far back as. But that's about as far as I'm slipping on this one. I know the 11. Yeah. I can still tell you the percentages. The 11-year-old. That's actually where I was going next. The 11-year-old in this was 27% of the formula.
Wow.
So that basically means the remainder of that was 15 years and older.
Wow.
And the 21-year-old was 8% of the formula.
Okay.
Originally it was 10%, but I finalized that formula in February or March. We didn't dump it until July. And so when we went to dump, it had already been pretty hot that summer, or this past summer. So I started to get cold feet about adding too much oak. So last minute, I knocked that down from 10% to 8% on the 21-year-old. Without doing a test blend or anything, but didn't have time. But I just knew that I just didn't want it to be too oaky. Already it was kind of right there on the cusp. And I'm not a big fan of a whole lot of oak, but I loved this one. But I could tell that much more and it'd be too much. So that was the reason for the last minute change. But my point is, this is, so 73% of this is 15 years or older.
Yeah.
So I'd have to go back and actually break down the ages and get the average age of everything we've done in the past. But I think this would be the oldest of any of the limited editions we've done. It certainly tastes like the oldest.
I think it does too.
In a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. It interests me to know how all of these different recipes work together and play off of each other. Do you kind of know what a specific blend might taste like before actually doing the blend of it? I mean, even, based on how old the products are.
Usually.
Yeah.
But I say usually because you can probably count on not being surprised 70% of the time.
Sure.
But there are still plenty of surprises. You can take 2 very straightforward batches, put them together, and they create something totally different from what you would expect. I think that's part of the experience and part of what makes it interesting. And so you're always learning, always having fun. You feel like a mad scientist throwing these things together. And on some level, it kind of is. Because you're throwing it together, evaluating them blind, looking at the surprises, patting yourself on the back for the directions that you anticipated. But it's kind of a windy development. As I was saying, you try to piece it all together once it's all said and done. But it's all done in like 6 weeks and every other day doing test blends. And
right.
It's a windy road. And I think in some ways the blends kind of lead you to where you end up. You can have an idea of from where you start, you have an idea of where you're trying to go. And it's very rarely that you get exactly to that place. You'll kind of, because to your point, you can't anticipate exactly what these batches are going to do when they come together. And so you might end up exploring a different avenue that you never even thought of originally.
Right.
So it's the most fun I have every year.
I'm sure.
Doing those blends. And so the hardest part is, again, knowing when to stop, and the hardest part is allowing yourself to stop because it's fun.
On any given day, how much are you sampling? Or what is kind of when you know that you can't sample anymore?
It depends on what kind of sampling it is. If it's just like single barrel selection, like you see all these cases here, those are all full of individual barrel samples in little bottles like this.
Okay.
And that's to approve to be dumped for single barrel. Each one of those little 100 ml samples represents one barrel. And I think that's one whole batch.
Wow.
So that's about, no, it's more than that. It's probably 2 batches. Each batch is about 280 barrels. And once a batch is approved, and to approve a batch, we're looking at it at full strength, at diluted to 20%, smelling, tasting, because that's very important. You want to look at that sample, because you can dissect a sample so many different ways. But you want to look at every different angle for that batch.
Of course.
Because it's going to be, that whole batch is going to be a single barrel. And that sample that you're looking at represents all those barrels. Once that batch is approved for single barrel, then the next stage is individual barrel approvals. That's a little bit quicker. Well, it's a little bit quicker per sample, but we're taking every single barrel from that batch. At that point, we're diluting it to 20% and looking at 120 to 150 samples every day. We don't do that every day, but there are weeks where it's 3-4 days a week. That's almost a constant, and we're doing that weekly.
Yeah. And
so that's a heavy day, but that's smelling. So that's one thing.
Sure.
I can smell 1,000 samples in a day. If I tasted 1,000 samples in a day, I couldn't taste 1,000 samples. Even diluted, you couldn't taste. Even diluting and spitting out, that would your productivity would probably decline at some point. Even diluted, spitting out. But the hardest part, and this was, I think, part of when I talk about experience, for me, and understanding my palate and being as effective as I can, part of what I learned was how to manage my palate when tasting things at full strength. And when I say that, it's because if I'm looking at evaluating test blends of limited edition or barrels or batches that are going to be private selection, they could be 10, 15, 20 samples in a morning.
Sure.
And for those, if they have to be tasted, first it's a bad idea to have that many to taste through because there's, besides the obvious.
the midday hangover.
Yeah, apart from the obvious. I mean, at full strength, we're looking at 120 proof roughly on these samples. And the palate fatigue after a couple samples is pretty significant.
Yeah.
So what I've learned how to handle it with my palate, because I haven't talked to a lot of people about how their palates work, but it seems like most people, they get numb, so the samples get a little bit mellower as they go. For me, it's the opposite. The alcohol, the burn, the high proof that seems additive as I go through.
Interesting.
Yeah, I could sit here, I could take this sample here at 120 proof, and if I didn't know better, or I guess I kind of know better, that's what I'm saying. Now I understand my palate. Let's say 10 years ago, you took that sample and you poured up 2 of them, both the same, exact same sample, and while I wasn't looking, and I taste them both within a minute of each other, I would swear that the second one was 10 degrees proof higher. I'd say those probably aren't the same sample. I'd say they taste the same in just about every way, but the second one is harsher. And I think that's important for me to know that about my palate, because I'm making a lot of decisions based on,
of course,
how mellow these batches are. So I know if I'm doing that, I'm useless. If I have to look at X number of samples in a short period of time, if I do it, I'm not going to actually put any credence or put any weight in those results. So what I do is I will wait like at least 5 minutes between each sample.
Okay.
And so if I'm looking at, say I'm doing test blends for a limited edition, and I've got 8 test blends, that could be a whole morning.
Sure.
Just to go through them maybe twice, maybe 3 times. And my office is across the hall, I'll come over here, taste the first one, make as many notes as I possibly can, have a drink of water, and actually set an alarm on my phone. Because I'll get sidetracked and end up forgetting what I was about. I'll set an alarm on my phone for 5 minutes, come back, look at the second sample, make notes. And I just totally let my palate just go as clean as possible. Mm-hmm. Because, again, it's additive for me. And the first sample I taste, it sounds bad, the first sample I taste in the morning is always the best. It's like, with a clean palate, I'm getting all those flavors out of it. It can be 140 proof.
Of course.
And it doesn't burn. Everything opens up. I'm getting the nuanced flavors. Then I taste that same sample 30 seconds later, and it's, yeah, it's 140 proof. It's harsh. So that's I'm just weird. Or my palate may be backwards that way. Maybe everyone's is like that. But I know the few people I've actually talked with about that, they're like, yeah, no, it's not how mine works. Well, unfortunately, that's how mine does.
No, I feel like mine does work in that way, in that it things do kind of mellow out throughout. So from my perspective, at the very least, hearing that just indicates that you are so different and so separate from other master distillers, from other distilleries, and people kind of have that notion of everything's going to be pretty much the same in terms of how people produce their bourbon.
Yeah,
but when you really get into it, it's totally different, and this is a perfect case of that.
Yeah, everybody does it their own way, and every distillery does things their own way. But obviously, all the ones that well are doing it right and have been doing it right. That's them for a reason.
Yeah,
we've all got our whether it's the technique of tasting between me and Jimmy or Eddie Russell or whomever, or our entry proof or whatever. Everybody has their own ways of doing it, and there's some science behind it, and a lot of it is personality.
Sure.
This is the personality of the brand. This is the way they do things. This is the flavor that comes out, and that's the interesting part, I think. That's where it gets fun. And for me, I'm a scientist. My background's chemistry.
Okay.
So I rely on science, but I recognize that's not the fun part. You need it, and it's important, and without it, we'd all be in trouble.
Sure.
But that's not the most fun part.
So you're not getting a thrill out of filling a beaker to exactly.
Not really, no.
So tell me about what it was that you just poured. This was part of the...
Yeah, this was the 21-year-old, since we were talking about that.
My goodness.
21-year-old OBSV.
It's hard to say anything other than an absolute oak bomb.
Yeah, and it's not bad. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, I'm not a big oak guy. I wouldn't be reaching for this as my daily pour, or I can appreciate it for what it is. And some people might absolutely love it. But, it's got that oak in there. Mm-hmm. And it has a little bit of that, I don't want to say sour, but it's a little bit flat. It's not vibrant. It doesn't have legs. But it does have some nice, unique, fruity top notes. Mm-hmm. Really chewy. And that was, when I was saying I was trying to tease that out and enhance those characteristics, that's what I'm talking about. Sort of unique raspberry and grape.
Yeah.
And it's those notes that you try to capture and you try to dilute the rest out.
I'm really enjoying the finish, personally. I think that's where a lot of those flavors are starting to kind of pop out. And
kind of syrupy fruit that sticks to your palate.
Absolutely. What's the proof on this?
This is a third tier at 21 years old. I would just be guessing by that as much as the flavor is probably like 115.
Yeah. There's about midway through the palate, it does kind of punch you with the alcohol heat, but it mellows out so quickly after that. And
you're right about the finish. Like, it's still there.
I quite enjoy the, yeah, right? No, I quite enjoy this. This is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too trying to use this as like an illustration. I'm a little too cruel. Like, this one's so old, but it's really not that bad of a batch. It's pretty good, but the oak is too much for my taste.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want that to be the dominant flavor in a limited release, but it helps. Even that oak that's in there, the just pure oak, just the pure wood flavor, even that has its place at the right level, and I think it's in the right level in this recipe.
And tasting it right after having tasted the finished product, that's a really good, now I can really see how it's all kind of come together and see how well everything plays off of each other. Now, this one is the 15-year...
Yeah, this is... Of the 4 recipes that went into it, this is my favorite.
Is this the K or the V?
This is the OESV.
Okay.
03. And this is one of those batches that just kind of has it all. This one I was saying, it's old enough that you get all of the richness. You get all of the positive notes that you typically get in the mid-teens, and especially for us with the V yeast strain. But so lively still.
Yeah. It's still got a real minty brightness to it on the nose as well.
It's a good follow-up to that 21-year-old because as you start thinking, this is fantastic, then you taste this, I go, okay, well, I can see how this 15-year-old is so good.
That is fantastic. Oh, the creaminess in the middle of the palate is just beautiful. And you can definitely see, I now having, again, had these separate from the final product, you can see how everything would mellow together so well and how it would really, enhance everything else that's going on there.
It's fun to deconstruct these things.
It really is. Yeah, it's a shame this one couldn't come out as its own release.
Between you and me, I don't know if you heard, we did a Father's Day release.
Yes, I did.
That's what this is.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that was all because we didn't have that planned. As I was doing this, like, this has got to be released somewhere. We don't do the limited edition single barrel anymore. We didn't have enough barrels to do anything significant with them.
Right.
So we decided to do something just at least to get a couple of them out there.
Sure.
Just so I could get one for home.
Right. I'm happy I got to taste it now because I hadn't had the chance to yet.
Yeah, that's it. It's not that barrel. I couldn't tell off the top of my head which barrels. This is the first here. I think the one, I can't remember. It wasn't this barrel, though, I know. But sister barrels to this. Same batch, same age. Everything's the same. Just different barrel.
Still fantastic. My goodness. Yeah. I think we're just about done here with this little episode.
Okay.
Brent, anything else you want to let the listeners know before we wrap things up?
Well, I did have one other thing here for you to taste. I should have.
Oh yes,
I should have pulled this out, and I touched on this. How that yeast strain. I guess and your listeners know about our different recipes.
Yeah.
But this one is a fantastic example of just the different flavors that can be expressed from a yeast strain. This is an actual batch that is in small batch select.
Okay.
And actually, you see all these samples up here?
Yes.
So yesterday, I reviewed the formula for small batch select. So we do that every 3 to 6 months because the batches that go into it, we still have the same barrels, many of the same, not the same barrels, but barrels from the same batches that went into this original.
Right.
But if we dumped the same recipe today that we did in April or March when we dumped this for the first time, it would not be the same.
Sure.
It would be 6 months older.
Right.
So we have to review that all the time, redo it. But that's a side note. Basically, I just pulled this out because I had it over here and I was working with it yesterday, and I want to share that with you. This is just a great example of the FE strain.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cheers to you as well. I appreciate it.
Well, cheers.
You sitting down with me.
Is this a good place to close it?
I think
with
so, yeah.
With a toast to you and your listeners?
I think that's a great place, too. Yeah.
Well.
So, Brent, thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you. And,
thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cheers, buddy. My thanks to everybody over at Four Roses for making this wonderful interview with Master Distiller Brent Elliot happen, especially Lauren, who I communicated with over email quite a bit, trying to organize this and get it working, and it certainly did, and I'm very happy that it finally happened. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. We got a couple things to do before we wrap up here. I figured I'd do a really quick little tips and bits for you. Because, that's what we kind of do at the end of these episodes. And I figured I would go with some music this time around. And we've been talking a lot recently about one of my current favorite artists, Tyler Childers. And I figured that I would talk about his contemporary, Sturgill Simpson, who was another Kentucky boy, who just put out a new album earlier this year, actually just a couple weeks ago, as of recording this, and they are going to be going on tour together next year, which is just so cool to see two old Kentucky boys playing tunes that they love and wrote together on the same stage. Pretty awesome. Going to be checking them out for sure. This is not an ad for them. I all of a sudden realized that kind of sounded like that, but yeah, I'm pretty pumped for that. And Sturgill's new album is really good. If you're a fan of Tyler's music, I think you might like what Sturgill has to offer too. So definitely go and check that out. That about wraps it up for this episode. If you would like to follow me on my personal accounts, I am at pritter1492. If you'd like to follow up with the show, it is at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Drop us a line at thisismybourbonshop.com if you have questions or comments for us. Give us a 5-star rate and review on the old iTunes app. I started reading out reviews from some of our listeners last week. I'll read out another one here. It's short, sweet, to the point. This is from Whitey714. The headline is "Great Podcast," and it says, Enjoy listening to this, any chance I get. Love the reviews of different bourbon. Thank you so much, Whitey714. For that review. That is really helpful. If you want to help the show out just a little bit, you can, of course, leave a rate and review on the iTunes app. Helps other people find the show, especially if they are listening to other bourbon podcasts or searching for it. It offers up something else for them to check out. That's really, really important and helps us out a whole lot. You can head to bourbonshop.threadless.com if you want to purchase some of our apparel and merchandise. We do have free shipping going on right now, still in celebration of the 100th episode, which came out just a few weeks ago. So thank you all. Again, just, side note for listening to that and downloading that. It seems like it's been pretty successful so far, so I really do appreciate that. Well, speaking of the 100th episode, by the way, if you would like to continue using that hotline that we set up to get some calls in for that episode, that is still active, by the way, and we would love to hear from you guys. If you have questions or comments or an idea or something that you would like read out on the show, please send us a voicemail at 859-428-8253. We will play that voicemail out on the show, and we will respond to it. And I think that's going to be a really fun way to get you guys, back in on the show. I thought that the 100th episode call-in portion was really successful, and we want to continue some of that. I think it would be a lot of fun. And also, if you are not yet a part of our Facebook group, you can head to facebook.com and search for This Is My Bourbon Group. Good little community that we have over there. A lot of fun talking about bourbon, what's going on in the news, and everything that's happening with the podcast as of right now. And then, last but not least, if you are not yet a patron of the show, you can head to patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. You can become a supporter of the show. There are some rewards that you can get for supporting the show, such as bonus episodes. You get live hangouts. You get Google chats. You get all sorts of different stuff. I'm going to be putting up an audio informational bit on there within the next few days, letting people know how things are going to function from here on out. So stay tuned for that if you are already a patron. Thank you so much for being over there. It really does mean the world to us. We really appreciate all of your support over the past couple of years. And we hope that you continue to do that and feel so inclined to do that here in the near future. That does it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Next week, Curtis and Swan will be back. We're going to be talking about some more big bourbon news that's been happening. We're going to be talking about what is going on with the Bourbon Trail right now and what the future of that is going to look like, as well as a very special review. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again for listening to this week. My name is Perry, and this is my Bourbon Podcast.